The average home gardener spends around $500 on tools in their first 2 years. And more than half of that money goes toward items they will rarely use, replace quickly, or that solve a problem that never truly existed. Not because the tools are defective, not because the gardener lacks discipline, because the purchase was never matched to how a garden actually functions. Tools are marketed by task: a weeder for weeding, a cultivator for cultivating, a knife for harvesting, a dibber for planting. It feels organized, it feels professional. But what it creates is specialization without frequency. And specialization without frequency is how $500 quietly disappears into a shed full of metal that looks impressive and does almost nothing to increase yield. The real mistake is not buying bad tools. It is buying too many acceptable tools instead of investing in the very few that meaningfully reduce friction week after week. Today, we are going to break down where that $500 typically goes, why most of it produces no measurable return, and the short list of tools that actually compound in value season after season. Before we talk about specific tools, we need to change the way tools are evaluated. Most gardeners judge a tool by what it can do. Does it dig? Does it cut? Does it rake? That is the wrong filter. The correct filter is frequency multiplied by friction reduction. A tool earns its place if you reach for it repeatedly, and it significantly improves the efficiency or quality of that task. If you use it twice per season, it is storage. If you use it weekly but it barely performs better than a simpler alternative, it is a convenience purchase disguised as necessity. When you apply this filter honestly, most garden tools fail. They were bought for edge case tasks, or they duplicate something already handled by a more versatile tool. The $500 mistake is rarely one large purchase. It is 15 to 20 small ones. A $25 cultivator, a $30 specialty weeder, a $20 knife, a $35 ergonomic trowel. Each feels harmless in isolation. Together, they equal hundreds of dollars performing the work of 4 well-chosen tools. Now let us look at where the money typically goes. A first-year gardener often purchases a rake, a standard hoe, a trowel, a hand fork, a cultivator, a stand-up weeder, a garden knife, inexpensive pruners, loppers, a kneeling pad, a hose with a sprayer nozzle, a watering can, gloves, plant ties, and sometimes a tiller rental. None of these purchases are irrational. Each has a plausible use case. But here's what actually happens over 2 seasons. The rake gets used in spring and fall. The standard chop hoe feels awkward and tiring, so it gets used twice and ignored. The trowel becomes indispensable. The hand fork overlaps with the trowel and sees minimal use. The cultivator duplicates the hoe. The specialty weeder is slower than hand pulling in well-prepared soil. Cheap pruners dull quickly and get replaced. Loppers sit unused until one neglected branch justifies them. The kneeling pad degrades. The hose becomes the default watering system despite being inconsistent and inefficient. The watering can become a seedling-only tool. By the end of 2 seasons, maybe 5 of those items are used weekly. The rest create the illusion of preparedness without contributing measurable productivity. There is also a psychological layer to this mistake that is worth naming. Tools feel like progress. They are tangible. They are visible evidence of commitment. Soil structure is invisible. Irrigation precision is boring. Crop spacing discipline is abstract. Buying equipment satisfies the urge to act. Improving systems requires patience and restraint. But yield in a garden is not limited by tool weight. It is limited by soil biology, moisture consistency, airflow, and timing. Tools can amplify a well-designed system. They cannot correct a poorly structured one. If your irrigation fluctuates between drought and saturation, no premium pruner will fix blossom drop. The danger is not owning tools. The danger is using tools as a substitute for system design. So what actually earns investment over a 10-year horizon? The tools worth real money share 3 traits. You use them weekly during the growing season. They meaningfully reduce labor or increase plant health, and they are durable enough to outlast cheaper replacements. When you apply that filter, the list becomes surprisingly short. The first tool worth real investment is a high-quality pair of bypass pruners, not the disposable $12 version, a forged replaceable blade pair in the $35 to $55 range. This is the most frequently used cutting tool in the garden. Tomato suckers, herb harvests, twine cutting, deadheading, shaping perennials, root trimming during transplanting. You will use it constantly. Cheap pruners crush stems and dull within months. The pivot loosens. Watch the spring weakens. The blade chips. You replace them, spend another $12, and the cycle repeats. Over 10 years, replacing cheap pruners costs more than maintaining one quality pair that you sharpen annually and swap the spring on once. And this matters beyond convenience. A clean cut heals faster on a plant. A crushed cut from dull blades creates a wound site that invites disease. Your pruners are not just a cutting tool, they are a plant health tool. The second tool worth investment is not the standard chop hoe most beginners buy. It is a stirrup hoe, also called an oscillating or hula hoe. This is the difference between abandoning hoeing entirely and maintaining weed control effortlessly. A stirrup hoe slices weeds just below the soil surface on both push and pull strokes. It is light, it is precise. It works between rows without damaging roots. A 45-minute weeding session becomes a 10-minute maintenance pass. Think about what that means across a full season. If you weed weekly from May through September, that is roughly 20 sessions. At 45 minutes each with hand pulling or a chop hoe, that is 15 hours of weeding per season. With a stirrup hoe, it is under 4 hours. That is 11 hours returned to you every year by a $30 tool. A good stirrup hoe costs $25 to $40 and lasts indefinitely with occasional sharpening. Most gardeners who believe they dislike hoeing simply use the wrong hoe. The standard heavy blade hoe is exhausting and imprecise for tight vegetable spacing. The stirrup hoe changes the task completely. Any tool that gives you back hours across a season earns 10 times its price. And the third tool worth paying for is a solid digging fork. Not a decorative garden fork, but a forged, full-size digging fork with steel tines and a solid handle. This tool replaces more other tools than almost anything else in the shed. It loosens soil without inverting it, which preserves soil structure. It harvests root crops cleanly. It turns compost. It breaks apart compacted clumps. It aerates beds before planting. It divides perennials. In most home garden contexts, it performs the functional role many gardeners think they need a tiller for, without damaging soil biology. It also eliminates the need for a separate cultivator, a broad fork in most cases, and a dedicated compost turning tool. One tool doing the work of four is not a compromise, it is efficiency. Cheap stamped forks bend under load and become frustrating within one season. A well-made fork in the $40 to $70 range lasts decades. That upfront difference between a $20 fork and a $50 fork is the difference between a tool you abandon and a tool you rely on for 20 years. And then there is irrigation. Most gardeners do not think of irrigation as a tool, but it is the highest leverage infrastructure in the garden. A simple drip system with a timer costs $75 to $150 depending on layout. It replaces daily hand watering. It eliminates leaf wetting that encourages fungal disease. It delivers moisture directly to root zones. It stabilizes plant growth. And it frees time. A hose and sprayer feel flexible, but they create uneven watering patterns that stress plants. A one pass with a sprayer nozzle delivers heavy water to the first few feet and mist to the back. Leaves stay wet for hours. Humidity at canopy level spikes. Fungal spores that need leaf moisture to germinate get exactly the conditions they require. Inconsistent watering suppresses yield more quietly and more effectively than dull tools ever could. Switching to drip is not a convenience upgrade. It is a biological correction. Over 5 seasons, it saves hundreds of hours and likely prevents disease losses that would have cost harvests. If you have $500 and no irrigation system, this is not optional luxury. It is structural leverage that pays compounding returns every season. Beyond those four, a short list of low-cost items earns its place through frequency. A sturdy forged trowel in the $15 to $25 range. A compost thermometer if you are managing hot compost. Durable work gloves with reinforced palms, and a sharpening stone that lets you maintain every bladed tool you own instead of replacing them. That is the complete high leverage kit. Now let us talk about where the money is consistently wasted. The most common high-cost mistake is powered soil equipment for small spaces. A tiller rental costs $50 to $100 per day. Purchasing one costs $300 to $800. And what actually happens? Soil structure gets pulverized. Fungal networks are severed. Dormant weed seeds buried below the surface are brought into the germination zone. A compaction shelf forms beneath the tilled layer. The soil looks fluffy for a few weeks, then settles. Roots struggle at depth. Weeds appear aggressively. And the gardener attributes the problem to something else. Fertilizer, spacing, variety, instead of the disturbance cycle created by the machine. So they till again the following spring. More structure destroyed. More weed seeds surfaced. The soil becomes dependent on tilling to feel workable, when in reality the tilling is what made it unworkable in the first place. A digging fork and compost achieve the same loosening effect without the structural damage, and at a fraction of the price. Unless you are breaking new ground on a large plot, a rototiller is one of the most expensive ways to make your soil worse. Specialty weeding tools are the second category of consistent waste. Stand-up extractors, claw-style pullers, flame weeders. Each solves a narrow problem with a dedicated device. But surface weeds are removed faster with a stirrup hoe, and deep taproot weeds are removed more effectively by hand. Weed pressure overall is more effectively reduced by 2 to 3 inches of organic mulch than by any mechanical device. Mulch costs less and improves soil as it decomposes. A $15 bale of straw outperforms a $40 specialty weeder every time. That is leverage. The third category is premium raised bed kits and branded infrastructure. High-end cedar or composite systems can cost hundreds per bed. But the biological performance difference between a premium kit and a simple frame of identical dimensions is negligible if the soil inside is the same. Roots do not know what brand holds the soil in place. They respond to depth, drainage, and nutrient density. If you have $500 in poor soil, filling a simple frame with high-quality compost produces more yield than purchasing a designer kit and underfilling it with mediocre mix. The leverage is always in the root environment, not the container. If you truly have $500 to invest this season, here is what a leverage-based spending model looks like. And this is important, because how you allocate matters more than how much you spend. A gardener who spends $200 in the right places will outproduce a gardener who spends $800 in the wrong places. Every single season. First, irrigation, a timer, pressure regulator, filter, and drip lines properly installed. $150 to $250 depending on garden size. That single decision stabilizes plant growth, reduces disease, and eliminates daily manual watering. Second, soil inputs, compost, aged manure, leaf mold, or targeted amendments based on a soil test. Another $100 to $150 here compounds across seasons. Organic matter improves structure, water retention, nutrient cycling, and microbial activity. Third, 1 or 2 high-frequency hand tools. A quality pruner, a stirrup hoe, or a digging fork. That allocation likely leaves a modest buffer for sharpening supplies or seasonal needs. Notice what this model avoids: large machinery, multiple overlapping gadgets, aesthetic upgrades. This is not minimalism for its own sake. It is capital efficiency applied to gardening. Here is the final filter to apply before any future purchase. Ask yourself, if I remove this tool tomorrow, would my yield measurably decline? If the answer is no, it is optional. If the answer is yes, it deserves quality. Irrigation passes that test. Soil amendments pass that test. A reliable pruner passes that test. Most powered equipment in small gardens does not. That single question eliminates most impulse purchases instantly. The $500 garden tool mistake is not about money. It is about hierarchy. Soil first, water second, structure third, speed last. When you reverse that order, you accumulate metal and lose productivity. When you respect that order, your investments compound quietly. A sharp pruner, a stirrup hoe, a durable digging fork, and water delivered consistently to roots. That small kit, paired with disciplined soil management, outperforms a shed full of rarely used machinery every single season. Because yield compounds, tools depreciate, and the smartest $500 you spend this year is the one that strengthens the invisible foundation beneath your plants, rather than adding weight to the shelf behind you.